Do you cook your ribs in aluminum foil or not?
Big thanks to Kamada Joe for sponsoring this episode.
This is maybe one of the most asked questions. And wrapping ribs even has a name. It's called the Texas crutch. It basically means you're using assistance to make ribs taste better or make them cook faster. Of course, I selected some beautiful ribs for this experiment. First of all, they gotta be baby back ribs for me personally, because I just think that those are the most delicious ribs you can have. They're such good eating because you have lots of meat on the bone. In Europe, we most of the time just call them spare ribs because it's hard to get any other type of pork ribs other than the regular baby back ribs. And if we check these specific ribs, we can see that it's still a waste product because at the end they were saving some money by cutting off close to the bone, but it still has plenty of meat to make sure that we still get that really good product. I'm going to take one of these ribs and wrap them halfway through the cook, and the other one I'm going to leave as is. And that is the basic experiment. It's not going to get more simple than that. For baby back ribs, the simplest method of removing the membrane is just taking a dinner knife and wiggle it underneath the silver skin, the membrane, and then pull it up, tear it off. There you go. And it's as easy as that. Oppa. This time I've chosen for seasoning to use the PITMASTERX gyros rub. Of course it's called gyros, but it's just because it has a Greek touch to the flavor profile. And if you know anything about Greek people, they absolutely love that pork. And these are so thick, these baby back ribs, that I'm even going to need to season the sides. Of course I'm going to season both of them with the same amount of seasoning. And now that I got them seasoned, I'm just going to let them sit on the countertop for about 10 minutes so they can soak up all of that flavor. And in the meantime, I'm going to fire up my barbecue. I'm going to start by opening up all the vents, opening up the Big Joe. I'm going to put in some charcoal. Put a couple of fire starters in, light them up. And once the charcoal's lit, I'm going to add a chunk of smoke wood. And in this case, that's going to be a nice piece of oak, so we get a little bit heavier smoke flavor. I'm going to put in the heat deflectors, put the grill grates in the highest position. And now I can put the ribs in, both unwrapped to begin with. I'm going to close the lid, set the top vent to 1.5 stripe open, and the bottom vent to about a finger open. That will let the temperature in the Kamada Joe rise up to about 120 to 130 degrees Celsius, which is around 260 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's how we're going to get smoke flavor on both these ribs before the next stage of the cook. The ribs are on 1.5 hours, and that's normally the time that I would wrap them up. And that means we're going to make a barbecue sauce, because I like to put a little barbecue sauce in my aluminum foil with the ribs so that they become extra juicy and tasty. And this time I had in mind to make jalapeno barbecue sauce. Pickled jalapenos. It's not going to be too spicy, but it's going to have that nice little zing that we love so much from a little pickle, and a little bit of sharpness from the jalapeno. So I'm going to chop fine about 2 tablespoons of pickled jalapenos, and I need them kind of fine so that they almost turn into a relish. Then I'm going to take out my pan, and not just any pan, the PITMASTERX cast iron skillet, 12-inch, hand polished, and this specific one I've been using for 6 months already, and it has a beautiful patina. If you want more details about the pan, go check out our web shop. Pickles go in the pan. To that I'm going to add a cup of ketchup, a 1/4 cup of apple cider vinegar, a tablespoon of Worcester sauce, 3 tablespoons of dark brown sugar, and 3 tablespoons of honey. Give it a good stir and let it come up to a boil. There's one more ingredient that I'm going to add, and that is the PITMASTERX gyro seasoning. And that's going to make sure that the flavors of the rub on the ribs is going to match up with the barbecue sauce. About 3 tablespoons. The sauce goes into the jar, and now the barbecue sauce is ready. I'm going to set that aside and check on the ribs. Time to get the aluminum foil out. Put on a slice of butter, just a little bit. And of course a little bit of that jalapeno barbecue sauce. Then we're going to take out 1 rack of ribs. Ooh, that looks good. Look at that. That is starting to look pretty amazing. And this is exactly the reason why I take it off in 1.5 hours. Because we got that beautiful smoke color. We got that dried up crispy bark building up on the outside. Fat is starting to render out. I'm going to take it, put it with the meat side down towards the butter and the sauce. Let me close this real quick. Make sure that the temperature doesn't rise too quick. And then I'm gonna fold this up. So one of the advantages that you have is that you're basically sealing off the good looks of the ribs. You're not gonna take it any further. Once you like the way they look, you're going to stop them from building up more crust on the outside. This is packed up and can now go back on the barbecue. This is the stretch where we wait until the ribs are fully cooked. I'm talking 92 degrees Celsius core temperature. And another 2 hours have passed and the ribs are at the desired temperature. So it's time to take a look. The ribs that we didn't pack look absolutely fantastic. Look at the amount of color that is on these ribs. Beautiful color. Browned up, nice bark, crispy on the edges. That's going to be very tasty, but we're not done yet because now we're going to brush on a little bit of that barbecue sauce. And this is called glazing the ribs. It's going to make them nice and sticky, get that beautiful shine. We're going to put it back on the barbecue until it reaches a core temperature of 69 degrees Celsius. Now let's take off the ribs that have been sitting in aluminum foil. Close the lid, of course. Always make sure that you keep that temperature in check. I'm gonna inspect this. Ooh. I can already tell that the ribs that have been sitting in aluminum foil are cooked way further than the ribs that have been just sitting on the barbecue. And you can tell by the amount of bone that is showing in between the meat. You see how the meat cracked away from the bone? That means that it's being cooked through and through and it's almost fall off the bone tender. Let's take a look at the other side. Look at that. That is the color of butter and barbecue sauce. And here I'm going to do the same thing, a little glaze. I can see that these ribs are not as crispy on the edge as the one that we let sit throughout the whole cook. So these are now going to go back on the barbecue. Be careful because they might fall apart, and I just need them to be sticky and shiny. And my guess is that that's going to take another 10 minutes or so. Time to take the ribs off the barbecue. And how do you determine that? Well, before they start tearing apart. That is the basic rule. But you can tell when, because they're already full cooked, you can tell when the barbecue sauce dries up and you get that beautiful shine through. That's how you know when they're done. The one that has been without the aluminum foil is a little bit more juicy on the outside. I think it's the fat that lays on top of the ribs that doesn't allow for much drying as much as we have with the one that's been sitting in the aluminum foil and where the fat is just dripped off more. These are the ribs that have been cooked without the aluminum foil. We have a dark brown crust on the outside. Here it's crunchy, there it's crunchy. We have a little bit more greasy shine on top. And the color is a little bit more light brown. If we take a look at the ribs that have been cooked in aluminum foil, then you see that the color is a little bit more dark red. We don't have those crispy edges, and the bones are significantly more popping out of the ribs than with the aluminum foil. You see, that's the difference. Now we slice the ribs up. I'm gonna start with the ribs that weren't in aluminum foil, and I gotta make proper slices, otherwise it's going to fall apart. We see that they're beautifully juicy. We got that smoke ring on the top and on the bottom. We got the crunch in the back. These ribs look amazing, looking good and juicy. Carefully sliced. You see, it's all the way that it's been cooked is much more tender because it is really hard to slice. The fat has been rendered inside the ribs better. We still have the smoke ring, but we don't have that crispy crust on the outside. We got nice, soft, juicy meat. So now that we know what the aesthetic difference is between the ribs, which one tastes best? First, the one without aluminum foil. It's soft, it's crispy, it's juicy, but there's still quite a bite. Now the one that has been cooked in aluminum foil. It rendered out a lot better than the ones we didn't cook in aluminum foil. But there's a good side to that and there's a downside to that. So you have less texture, it's kind of like everything's falling apart on you. But the good side is that everything is, well, lightly digestible because the fat rendered out. But it also gives it a little more drier texture. And this is kind of funny because the other one was crispy on the outside, and that's when you expect that dry crust. But in reality, the ribs cooked in aluminum foil were a little bit drier because the fat melted so much it kind of went out of the ribs. Do you cook your ribs in aluminum foil or not? And I would say it's just a personal preference. I personally cook my ribs in aluminum foil because I want to render down that fat a little further. It makes it easier to digest, and I eat a lot of ribs, so that's something that I enjoy a lot more. For me, at the moment, I don't see any problems for me personally because I have both racks and I will enjoy them. Hope this was a little bit of help. I do understand there's no definitive answer. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are in the comments down below. See you guys in the next one. Cheers. Come on.